My daughter practiced the piano all week to play Happy Birthday for her aunt. When she finished, my mother-in-law said loudly, "That was painful to listen to." My sister-in-law laughed into her drink. My daughter's hands started shaking. Then my husband stood up and announced this. The room froze. Some people think the worst thing a mother-in-law can do is dislike you. That is not true. The worst thing is when she decides your child is also a disappointment. I realized that slowly after marrying Daniel. His mother, Linda, never yelled, never caused obvious scenes. Instead, she made small comments that sounded harmless to anyone who didn't know her well. But they always landed exactly where they were meant to. Especially when it came to my daughter Emma. Emma is 8. She is quiet, careful, the kind of kid who practices things over and over because she is afraid of doing them wrong. When she started piano lessons last year, she fell in love with it immediately. Every afternoon the same routine. Backpack on the floor. Set. Then the piano. Last week she came home from school with a huge idea. "Aunt Rachel's birthday is Saturday," she told me. "I want to play Happy Birthday for her." Sounded simple. But to Emma it was a big deal. For the next 6 days she practiced non-stop. The same song again and again. Sometimes slowly counting each note. Sometimes starting over when she made a mistake. Daniel would walk through the living room and say, "That sounded better than yesterday." Emma would smile like she had just won something. But on Friday evening Linda called. I could already tell from the tone of her voice the conversation was not going to be pleasant. "We're doing dinner tomorrow for Rachel," she said. "Don't be late this time." "We'll be there," I said. Then she asked what Emma had been doing lately. "Piano lessons," I told her. Linda paused. "Well, let's hope she's improving. Last time she touched the piano it sounded like random noise." I didn't answer. She continued talking about something else as if she had just commented on the weather. After I hung up, Emma walked into the kitchen. "Was that Grandma?" "Yes." "Did you tell her about the surprise?" "No," I said. "It'll be better if she hears it tomorrow." Emma nodded and ran back to the piano. Saturday evening we arrived at Linda's house. Everything looked the same as always. Perfect table, perfect glasses, everything placed exactly where she liked it. Rachel was already halfway through her first drink when we sat down. Emma stayed quiet during dinner, barely touching her food. I knew she was thinking about the piano sitting in the living room. Halfway through the meal Linda started talking about parenting again. He liked that subject when I was around. "Children need structure," she said while cutting her steak. "Otherwise they grow up spoiled." Rachel smirked. Linda glanced at Emma and then at me. Some mothers confuse hobbies with discipline. Daniel shifted in his chair but didn't say anything yet. Emma stared down at her plate. A few minutes later she leaned toward me. "Mom, can I do the song now?" I looked at Daniel. He gave her an encouraging nod. Emma stood up and walked toward the piano in the living room. Rachel noticed. "What's happening?" Emma sat on the bench. "I practiced something for your birthday." Rachel shrugged. "Okay." The room went quiet. Emma placed her hands on the keys. The first notes came out carefully. A little slow. A little shaky. But she kept going. "Happy birthday to you." I could see her concentrating so hard that her shoulders barely moved. She reached the last line and finished the song. The final note faded in the room. Emma turned around with a hopeful smile. Then Linda spoke loudly from the table. That was painful to listen to. Rachel laughed into her drink. Emma's hands started shaking on the piano keys. And that was the exact moment my husband stood up. Daniel stood up slowly. At first no one paid attention. Chairs moved during dinners all the time in Linda's house. People refilled drinks, grabbed napkins, checked their phones. But Daniel didn't reach for anything. He looked directly at his mother. The room became strangely quiet. "Emma," he said, "come sit with me for a minute." Emma slid off the piano bench and walked over. Her eyes were glossy and she kept looking at the floor. When she reached him, Daniel placed his hand on her shoulder and pulled out the chair beside him. She sat down without saying a word. Linda cleared her throat. "Oh, please don't make a scene. I was only being honest. If she wants to play piano, she should learn to take criticism." Rachel snorted softly into her glass. Daniel didn't look at them yet. He was looking at Emma. "You practiced all week for that?" Emma nodded. "Every day." Another nod. Daniel gave a small smile. "That's a lot of work." Linda rolled her eyes. "It's a children's song." That was when Daniel finally turned toward the table. I want everyone to listen for a second, he said. Linda leaned back in her chair. What now? Daniel rested his hands on the table. My daughter spent 6 days practicing a song because she wanted to do something nice for Rachel. Rachel looked uncomfortable but said nothing. And the first thing she hears after finishing is that it was painful. Linda lifted her glass. It was. Rachel laughed again. Daniel nodded slowly. All right. He looked around the table, then back at his mother. Then let's talk about painful. Linda frowned. What are you talking about? Daniel reached into his pocket and placed his phone on the table. For the past few months, he said, I've been keeping track of something. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Keeping track of what? Daniel unlocked his phone. Every time Emma leaves your house upset. The room froze for a second. Linda's smile disappeared. What kind of nonsense is that? Daniel scrolled through the screen. October 14th. You told her the drawing she made looked messy. Linda waved her hand. It did. November 2nd. You told her she talks too quietly and no one can understand her. Rachel shifted in her seat. Daniel continued. December 11th. You told her she was spoiled because Isabella lets her choose her own clothes. Linda's face tightened. This is ridiculous. Daniel didn't stop. January 6th. You told her the cookies she helped bake were burnt. Emma slowly looked up at him. The room was completely silent now. Linda's voice became sharp. So what? Kids need to hear the truth. Daniel locked the phone and placed it back on the table. Then he said the thing that none of them expected. Good. Because I'm about to tell the truth too. Rachel stopped moving her glass. Linda stared at him. What truth? Daniel looked directly at her. The truth about where your money actually comes from. And for the first time that evening, Rachel's smile disappeared completely. Rachel slowly lowered her glass. Linda stared at Daniel like she had misheard him. What are you talking about? Daniel didn't answer right away. He pulled Emma's chair a little closer to him. Emma, go sit with Mom for a minute. Emma got up quietly and came back to my side of the table. She leaned against me, still confused about what was happening. Across the table, Linda's expression had turned cold. You're being dramatic, she said. Sit down and stop embarrassing yourself. Daniel remained standing. No. Rachel forced a laugh. Seriously, what is this about money? Daniel looked at her. You should probably hear this too. Linda's fingers tightened around her glass. Daniel. But he continued. Mom likes to remind everyone how generous she is. The house, the dinners, helping Rachel with rent, helping us with Emma's school. Rachel nodded slowly. Yeah. Because she works hard. Daniel shook his head. She hasn't worked in 12 years. Linda slammed her glass down. That's enough. Daniel didn't react. Everything she has comes from Dad's trust fund. Rachel frowned. So the money has rules. Linda's voice dropped lower. You don't know what you're talking about. Daniel looked straight at her. I know exactly what I'm talking about. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. The sound of the paper unfolding seemed louder than it should have been in that silent room. Rachel leaned forward. What is that? Daniel placed the papers on the table. It's from the trustee who manages Dad's estate. Linda stood up abruptly. You had no right. Daniel ignored her. Rachel picked up the top page and started reading. At first her expression looked confused. Then it changed. Wait. She flipped the page. Wait, what? Linda tried to grab the papers but Rachel pulled them away. Rachel, give that back. Rachel looked at Daniel. This says the trust transfers to you next year. Daniel nodded once. Yes. Rachel's face went pale. Mom told me she controls it. Daniel gave a small shrug. She controls the monthly allowance. Not the actual fund. Linda's voice was shaking now. You went behind my back. Daniel looked at her. No. I asked questions. Rachel kept reading the document. Her voice became quieter. This also says, the spending reports are reviewed. Daniel nodded again. They are. Rachel slowly raised her eyes toward their mother. Mom, why does this say there's a warning? Linda didn't answer. Rachel turned another page. Then she stopped moving completely. What does misuse investigation mean? The silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had been said before. Emma looked up at me. Mom, what's happening? I didn't know what to say. Because Daniel hadn't finished yet. And judging by the look on his face, the worst part was still coming. Rachel stared at the paper like it had suddenly changed languages. Misuse investigation, she repeated. Linda reached across the table again. Give it to me. Rachel pulled it back. No. Daniel finally sat down. Linda looked at him like she didn't recognize him anymore. You had no right digging into family matters. Daniel folded his hands on the table. It became my business when you started using that money to control people. Rachel looked between them. Control who? Daniel glanced toward Emma and then back at Rachel. Everyone. Linda laughed, but it sounded forced. This is ridiculous. Rachel shook her head slowly. Mom, what is this investigation? Linda grabbed her glass again. Nothing. Paperwork nonsense. Daniel leaned back in his chair. It started 3 months ago. Rachel's head snapped toward him. What started? The trustee noticed unusual withdrawals. Linda slammed her hand on the table. That money is mine. Daniel nodded. You say that a lot. Rachel turned the page again. How much money are we talking about? Daniel answered before Linda could. 200,000. Rachel's mouth fell open. 200, what? Linda stood up. This conversation is over. But Rachel wasn't listening anymore. She flipped through the pages quickly. These reports show transfers. Daniel nodded. Yes. Rachel read one line out loud. Private consulting payment, 30,000. She looked at Daniel. What consulting? Daniel shrugged. That's what the trustee asked too. Linda grabbed her purse from the chair. I'm leaving. Daniel didn't stop her. Rachel looked up again. There's another transfer here. Daniel waited. Rachel read slowly. Real estate deposit, 70,000. She frowned. Mom didn't buy property. Daniel looked at her. No. Rachel's voice became quieter. Then where did it go? Daniel finally said the thing he had been holding back. It went to someone named Kyle Mercer. The name seemed to hit Linda like a brick. She froze near the doorway. Rachel noticed immediately. Who is Kyle Mercer? Linda didn't turn around. No one. Rachel looked back at the papers. This says he's receiving payments every month. Daniel nodded again. Yes. Rachel slowly lifted her head. Mom. Linda still didn't move. Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper now. Why are you sending a stranger thousands of dollars from Dad's trust? For several seconds no one said anything. Then Linda turned around. And the look on her face made it clear she had just realized something. Daniel hadn't only exposed the money. He had exposed the person she had been hiding for years. And Rachel had just started to figure it out. Linda walked back to the table slowly. Not angry this time. Rachel, she said, give me the papers. Rachel held them tighter. No. I want to know who Kyle Mercer is. Linda looked at Daniel. You're destroying this family over nothing. Daniel didn't answer. Rachel flipped to the first page again. These payments started 4 years ago. She looked at her mother. 4 years, Mom. Linda exhaled through her nose. It's not your business. Rachel gave a short laugh. It's literally Dad's money. Daniel leaned forward slightly. The trustee asked the same question last month. Linda's eyes moved toward him. And what did you tell them? Daniel shook his head. I told them I didn't know. Rachel looked confused. Then how do you know the name? Daniel pointed to the page. Because the trustee sent a notice to the whole family. Rachel looked stunned. I never got anything. Daniel nodded. That's because Mom changed the mailing address for the trust updates. Rachel slowly turned toward Linda. You hid it from me? Linda finally sat down again. This is blown out of proportion. Rachel tapped the document. Then explain it. For a moment Linda said nothing. Emma shifted beside me quietly. She was listening to everything even though she probably didn't understand most of it. Daniel noticed. Emma, he said softly, why don't you go sit in the living room for a minute? Emma nodded and walked away toward the piano again. When she disappeared around the corner, Linda finally spoke. Kyle Mercer is helping me with something. Rachel waited. What kind of something? Linda rubbed her forehead. A project. Rachel looked at Daniel. Does that sound real to you? Daniel didn't answer. Rachel leaned closer to the table. Mom. Linda kept staring down. Is he a business partner? No response. Rachel tried again. Is he a lawyer? Nothing. Then Rachel's voice changed. Is he a man you're seeing? Linda's head lifted instantly. That's none of your concern. Rachel froze. You're kidding. Daniel finally spoke again. He's 29. The room went completely still. Rachel blinked twice. 29. Linda looked furious. You investigated him? Daniel shrugged. The trustee did. Rachel leaned back in her chair slowly. Mom, you're sending Dad's money to some guy in his 20s? Linda snapped. He understands me. Rachel stared at her. You met him 4 years ago and started paying him $30,000 at a time. Linda slammed her hand on the table. You don't know anything about him. Daniel nodded once. That's actually the problem. Rachel looked between them again. But why is the trust investigating? Daniel took a breath. Because Kyle Mercer isn't just taking the money. Rachel frowned. What do you mean? Daniel looked at the papers again. 2 weeks ago he disappeared. Rachel's stomach visibly dropped. Disappeared. Daniel nodded. And he didn't disappear alone. Rachel's voice was barely audible now. Who else is missing? Daniel looked toward the living room where Emma had gone. Then back at Rachel. The $70,000 deposit. Rachel swallowed. What about it? Daniel said quietly. That money was used to buy a house. Rachel leaned forward again. Where? Daniel answered. 2 streets away from here. And suddenly everyone in the room realized something terrifying. Kyle Mercer hadn't disappeared far away. He had been living almost next door the entire time. Watching them. Rachel pushed her chair back slightly. 2 streets away? Daniel nodded. The trustee hired someone to look into it after Kyle stopped answering calls. Linda's voice came out low. He didn't disappear. Daniel looked at her. You know where he is? Linda hesitated. Rachel leaned forward. Mom. Linda rubbed her temples. He just needed space. Rachel stared at her in disbelief. You gave him $200,000 and he needed space? Daniel slid the papers across the table. The house was purchased under a company name. Rachel scanned the line again. Mercer Holdings. Daniel nodded. But here's the strange part. Rachel looked up. The house is empty now. Linda's head snapped up. What? Daniel pointed to the last page. The investigator went there 3 days ago. Furniture gone. Car gone. Everything cleared out. Rachel whispered. He robbed you. Linda shook her head quickly. No. Kyle wouldn't do that. Daniel didn't argue. Instead he said something that changed the entire situation again. He didn't leave alone. Rachel looked confused. What does that mean? Daniel turned his phone around and placed it on the table. It was a photo. Security camera footage from the street near the house. A moving truck. And someone standing beside it. Rachel leaned closer. Her face drained of color. That's Mark. Daniel nodded. Mark was Rachel's boyfriend. The same one sitting beside her at the table an hour earlier before he left to take a phone call. Rachel looked toward the front door. Mark still hadn't come back. Linda whispered. No. Daniel spoke quietly. The truck left the neighborhood yesterday morning. Rachel dropped back into her chair. So my boyfriend and your Kyle stole the money and disappeared together. No one at the table spoke. From the living room we suddenly heard the piano again. Emma had started playing the song one more time. Slowly. Carefully. Happy birthday to you. Daniel stood up and walked into the living room. Rachel sat there staring at the empty doorway where Mark had walked out earlier. Linda didn't move at all. For the first time since I had known her, she had nothing left to say. Daniel knelt beside Emma at the piano and said, That sounded even better this time. And that was the moment I realized something strange. The entire night that had just exploded our family apart started because an 8-year-old girl simply wanted to play a birthday song.